and welcome to this special edition of Trader Talk TV Virtual. Welcome again to this virtual edition. It's obviously, we're still in the middle of COVID, so we're doing this virtually, which is great. Today we've got Raby with us, and Phil is the GM of mediarithmics. And today we're going to talk about the evolution of the marketing data stack. And there's lots going on in that space. It's hugely important, a lot of acquisitions, a lot of fragmentation, and hopefully we can get a solution that might maybe bring the whole thing together. So Phil's going to talk about that a bit. Before we do that, I'll introduce Phil, and he'll explain what mediarithmics is.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Kieran. So yeah, and thanks for the introduction. So as you've quite kindly outlined, I am the GM of the UK. I've recently taken over that post in mediarithmics in the UK. As Kieran mentioned, we are a French business. We've been around for circa 7 years, so it's 2013. We took some funding in COVID as well, which was fantastic for us, so circa 8 million euros. Broadly, as a business, the way that we talk about ourselves is we are a universal data marketing platform. So fundamentally, providing the central nervous system for all of a brand's data marketing needs. We work with a range of clients across retail, also publishers as well, and broadcasters. Predominantly in France, we have some great brands in the UK, including Channel 4. And we're looking to make more of a push into English-speaking markets.
Right, very good. And obviously you probably class yourself sort of on that sort of data management optimization layer that is becoming very important in the current sort of ecosystem. Let's jump into the presentation. But I just want to start off as a sort of as framing questions. We're talking about the data stack in terms of all these pieces of technology. You've got CDPs and DMPs and all sorts of things. Do you think that it's become a little bit complicated with too many solutions overlapping? Is that an issue that you see from the mediarithmic side?
Yeah, no, I think so, definitely. I think clients are definitely thinking, what type of data stack do they need to perform data marketing use cases? That's a question that a lot of clients have been asking over the last, I guess, 5 or 10 years, and there's potentially not an easy answer. So, the question for the brand is, how do you serve the right message, the right user at the right time, underpinned by data? And I think fundamentally we need to understand how the industry has evolved from a data point of view. So going to my presentation, I guess the dream of data marketing for many brands, as I said before, was sending to the right message to the right user with a great ROI, for example. Coming from a spray and pray approach to an instant, one-to-one messaging and speaking to your customers on a one-to-one basis. And broadly for many brands, the main purpose of this was to transform potential prospects. So people that were looking to target into customers, and then those customers into loyal customers, and then also high-value customers as well. Now, what was probably happening in the past, and I think this is common for kind of many brands, is marketers were targeting those potential prospects with a scattergun approach. So sending millions of non-personalized messages, hoping that actually one would hit the target. Now it's about understanding the customer in more depth, quite frankly, when it comes to a brand. And it's about listening to each of those prospects and each of those customers in terms of how they're interacting with your brand as if you're a marketeer as well. So there's a number of signals that you can track as a brand. You can track how a prospect's interacting with your campaign, for example. From a media standpoint, have they clicked on an ad? How they browse your site? What particular CTAs have they engaged with? Have they purchased with you? And then obviously these customers or these prospects fold into your CRM when they become customers as well. And then from a brand point of view as well, there's a number of ways that these, or as a marketeer, that you can communicate to these customers as well. And they broadly fall into 3 buckets, which is owned, which is POS, mailing, call center, push notifications, email, and on-site. So quite a lot there to take in. So, and then from an open web, from a pay point of view, we're talking about things like, mobile campaigns. We're talking about things like display campaigns in the open web. We're talking about potentially things like addressable TV, and then we have the walled gardens. So I guess an acronym, the GAFA, so Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, of course. And I think fundamentally the key question for marketeers has been, what technology do you need to have in the middle to deliver this concept of speaking to your customers? And before we kind of go on to technology, if we look at something like the GAFA, so Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple, they're obviously strong as platforms. We all know that. They capture a huge amount of data, and they have a huge amount of data. If you look at something like a Google, they were the first platform or the first company to really leverage user intent at scale. If you look at things like paid search, Facebook, you could probably say that they've revolutionized things like lookalike modeling and retargeting, and it's become highly addictive for brands using Facebook. They continue to use Facebook even with the controversy that's centered around them. And then Amazon as well, which is, you could probably call the new kids the block. They have an unrivaled amount of first-party data which they can leverage at scale as well. And they leverage that for their retail media proposition. So, of course, all of these platforms can activate effective campaigns on their own audiences. They can also overlay client data as well when it comes to audience, browsing data, purchasing data. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think the question for many marketeers, and that's the way that we're speaking to brands, is how much should you continue to invest and over rely on these platforms? And at mediarithmics, we certainly don't say you should stop investing in these platforms, because ultimately we know as a marketeer it's almost impossible because there's unrivaled scale there. But how, as a brand, can you potentially take back some of that control and start to build your own stack and leverage your own data more effectively as a brand as well? So that kind of leads me, and I know this is a lot to take in, but that kind of leads me on to, I guess, what technology could maybe sit in the middle, which is, how we move on to the data management platform, the DMP. We started to hear about DMPs probably about 8 to 10 years ago. There was a rise, obviously a huge rise with DMPs in parallel with programmatic media buying. The purpose of the DMPs was to target specific audiences. They were used to collect navigation data associated with cookies. And the main challenge really for DMPs, which is why there's potentially a little challenges there, I guess, there in the market today, is they relied on third-party cookies.
Yeah, you could argue that it is now a legacy technology, given the fact that cookies are going away, and it's a string of JavaScript in a database effectively, and activating that against media. So it seems to be sort of, if you think about it, that was the data tech 1.0, if you will. CRM was data tech 1.0. This is data tech 3.0. Like,
yeah, of course, and I think fundamentally, we know that third-party cookies are degrading. We've had the recent announcements from Google. From a Chrome point of view, and in parallel, we're seeing the trend with Apple and IDFA as well. I think as an industry, we need to find new ways of tracking a user, and I think from a mediarithmic standpoint, there's multiple ways that we can propose solutions to clients with the degradation of third-party cookies. One of those examples is pushing users to log in, and for some brands that's easier than obviously other brands and publishers as well. Another solution is edge computing, which is something that mediarithmics offers, and that's based on local storage. It's a great solution, but it could also be a short-term solution as well. So we certainly don't recommend investing in plays that only offer this. And then, probably another interesting option is talking about machine learning and AI as well. So how can AI help a brand qualify a user that doesn't give you or doesn't have the personal information of that user. So, but I think ultimately, as mediarithmics, it's important for us as a tech backbone to continue to develop tools for clients to help them find the best solution, because ultimately we know that the final solution isn't there today. And if they're a tech platform saying that they do have that silver bullet, they're probably lying as well. So I think if we look at something, I kind of continue down the DMP front as well. There's lots of players in the market. Obviously, you have the big players, the traditional players like the Salesforces, the Oracles, the Adobes, who have made a number of acquisitions over, I guess, the last 10 years. They benefit, these are huge companies, right? So they benefit in having huge infrastructure, storing huge amounts of data. There's some challenges, I guess, around the bigger tech companies. They can be the solutions can be potentially cumbersome. They can lack an element of real-time data collection and processing as well. So they can aggregate data, which has issues and knock-on effects. And then they potentially become, I guess, a little bit Frankenstein-like in the way that they've acquired all of these companies. They've integrated these companies and these modules of these companies into their value offering, and ultimately, from a brand point of view, these solutions have potentially become quite cumbersome as well.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to think about as well. On a side note, and I'll talk about it later in the presentation about them pivoting to CDPs as well. But then you have the new generation and the new breed of DMPs that have come out in probably the last 5 or so years. More agile players that can leverage audiences in real time with great new technologies. I talked about edge computing before, so that's on the rise. Their technologies allow brands to more quickly integrate their stacks, into their ecosystems. But there can also still be challenges around customization and delivery of use cases. So that gives you a bit of a picture of the DMPs and how that's evolved. Clients have then gone on to purchase other pieces of technology, so marketing automation tools, to allow them and enable them to communicate to their customers from a personalized email point of view. They've also invested in things like on-site personalization tools, which again has allowed them to communicate to their customers. And I think ultimately, if you look at these point solutions, they work fantastically, but they've created another challenge, I think, for retailers, brands, et cetera, of creating additional silos in the way that their marketing stack is working. So that is another challenge that we're seeing today.
So is that where I'm just jumping ahead to your next slide, but is that where the CDP comes in to try and unify a lot of that data, and sort of manage it, because it's the evolution of sort of the DMP model, effectively.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right, and that leads perfectly onto how the industry is evolving. And you're absolutely right. If we move on to the next slide, I've skipped one there. The concept of the CDP, as you say, the customer data platform for people that hate acronyms out there, which I do. This is the new shiny tool that I guess 10 years ago we had the DMP. Now we have the CDP, and ultimately the concept of the CDP is it's a modern day CRM, right? So it's CRM 2.0. It's a tool that can collect any type of data, whether that be campaign data, whether that be CRM data, first party data, of course, navigation data, obviously with quality controls in it as well. And then also the provision of AI functionality as well, embedded within those platforms, which is commonplace. And I guess when we're talking about AI, there was a view really that from many that probably raised eyebrows, that obviously AI can be sexy, but it potentially doesn't work as an off-the-shelf product. So there's no one size that fits all, and client specificities when it comes to data and their use cases and their modeling also needs to be taken into consideration as well. So that's a CDP, and then we had another piece of technology, which is the data lake. So the data lake was probably arising or coming to the fold, at the same time as the CDP. Brands were investing heavily in data science teams. Data science teams then invested in data lakes with a view of data scientists mixing all types of data. So customer prospect data and mixing with other types of data as well. And fundamentally allowing data scientists to build algorithms and models with ease as well. But the problem or one of the challenges with the data lake is fundamentally that the data lake doesn't connect to, or today anyway, it doesn't connect to activation tools. So if you're a marketeer at brand X and you only have a data lake, you cannot connect or action that data across display, across video, across email, etc.
So is the data lake and the CDP similar? Because the data lake is just a giant database of disparate data sources and data points, and then obviously your data scientists are taking a Python script and making building models around that and sort of making it work. But it just seems to me like it's an experimentation internally, right? It doesn't have any hooks into the wider ecosystem, whether that's to do with your media activation or even your subscription tools on the publisher side, or even your site optimization for a marketer. So you look at this and you got your DMP and your CDP and your data lake, right? There seems to be like this fragmentation on the data tech stack layer. Is there a way to bring all this together? It feels to me that within an organization, it's particularly like large organizations, having that kind of fragmentation probably will hurt the business's underlying goals and objectives.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. I think fundamentally, from a mediarithmic standpoint, that is our goal, to bring everything together under one roof. And as I said at the top of the presentation, we are that universal data marketing platform. So fundamentally, enabling brands to deliver all of their data marketing needs, from collection, segmentation, activation, reporting, and insights. I think fundamentally, if we move on to the next slide, as a brand, we fundamentally don't believe really that you should have on one side a DMP, one side a CDP, and then on the other side a data lake, because that's only good for one person, right? Or one group of people in the industry, and that's salespeople. So our belief, the model of tomorrow is that one central hub. And I think ultimately, if you look at and the way that we talk about this with clients is quite interesting. It's more of an analogy, I think, when we talk about I guess it being like a human body. So from a I guess a person point of view, we have our brain, which is our memory and our processing, and I guess you could probably call this the data lake. We also have our nervous system as well, which is how we move our muscles and move our body, etc. And then from a nervous system point of view, if we align that with the technology, the nervous system from a CDP point of view should be able to collect any type of information in real time from anywhere, with no compression and no aggregation of data, and being able to activate it in real time as well across the channels that are relevant for that client as well. And I think then you start to talk about things like AI as well. So enabling, not just providing off-the-shelf AI, which is actually something that mediarithmics does as well, but being able to allow a client to fold in their own AI and data modeling into the platform to be able to deliver use cases as well. So that's really important. We have many clients that are doing that today. One of those is actually Channel 4 in the UK. I'll call them out again. But going back to a question before about third-party cookies and the degradation of those is actually AI could be potentially one of the catalysts for overcoming the issue.
Sorry for cutting across you.
Yeah.
I was just want to ask about that, right? Given we are heading into a cookieless world, right? And
Yep.
all of the machinations to kind of make the cookie viable again are just not going to work. So that means the sort of amount of logged in data that you're going to have is going to be sort of reduced, right? Whether you're a brand or a publisher.
Yeah.
So is there a way for machine learning that can be applied to the data within your technology to build models? So, I mean, I think that probabilistic modeling is going to be the way that we go, building sort of models that are based on a set of data points that you can extrapolate and scale. Is that the key function here for the ML stuff that you will have within the technology itself?
Yeah, no, I think so. Well, I think it's definitely one of the ways. I could probably give you an example actually of how that might work from a probabilistic modeling point of view with someone that or a type of brand that doesn't have a lot of first-party data. So I guess if you look at FMCG brands, fundamentally FMCG brands have found it very difficult to acquire first-party data because they don't have that one-on-one relationship with the consumer. They don't have that end action. That's normally separated by a retailer like Tesco. So we could help a brand like P&G create something which is called a second-party data deal. This could happen with, I guess, a retailer. And we don't work with this retailer, but a good example is something like AO.com, who sell washing machines. Now, without any data sharing, we could enable P&G to leverage insights from AO.com. So things like identifiers, segments, data, consent on people that have bought washing machines through AO. Now, ultimately, this number of people is going to be relatively small, right? So you might only have 10,000 people that have bought a washing machine with AO.com. And when it comes to programmatic, that amount of people isn't really efficient. But we could use that 10,000 strong audience as a seed audience, track what they're browsing, where they've been browsing, their typical profiles, and then start to layer on machine learning algorithms to build lookalike models whilst defining the best media, the best geos, the best browsers, for example. And that's obviously in the open web. And then that seed audience can also be packaged up to send to the walled gardens like a Facebook to carry out their lookalike modeling as well. So you can start to build audiences that way. Okay,
so there is an opportunity to scale then beyond the cookie.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. I mean, that's great, Phil. I mean, that's a great overview of that data tech stack piece. And mediarithmics are obviously a solution that's going to try and do that. And thank you for that overview, Phil. That was really, really insightful and a good deep dive on that area.
A pleasure. And look, we really appreciate the time this morning. And yeah, as I said before at the top of the presentation, we are and actually just on top of what we've kind of discussed, those data co-ops are becoming more and more commonplace as well when it comes to these second-party data deals, and it's going to be definitely an interesting 2021, both from probably a publisher and a brand point of view.
And we're looking forward to it, and hopefully we'll be able to talk about it post-COVID when we all get together at the next big ad tech conference. Bill, thanks for your time this morning. Appreciate it. And thank you, viewer, for tuning into this week's Trader Talk TV virtual Trader Talk TV. And we'll see you next time. Phil, thanks again. And everybody, thank you.
Thank you, Kieran.